Welcome to Chronicles of Old Singapore. This is Dr Loh KS, and I speak to people about old Singapore before it became a global city. Back with us to finish the uncompleted business from a couple of weeks ago is Irene Hoe. Irene, how are you this morning?
Great.
Sorry to hear you have COVID.
Well, it's kind of like
Yeah.
everybody's getting it every so often. Went to dinner with a few friends, and three of us got it from one of the girls who didn't know she had it.
Did you get a shot this year?
Yeah, just had
Okay.
it in May.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So maybe you're well protected then. Yeah.
The one of the girls who didn't get it, she got the mRNA shot. The not mRNA, what they call it, the one that seems to upset a lot of people. I did Pfizer. She did the other one, and
mRNA
she
lah.
did. She's
Yeah.
is that mRNA? So
Mm.
she didn't get infected. The rest of us got infected, except for another girl who was sitting much farther away. So anyway,
Mm.
whatever it is, it's so long as I don't have to go to hospital. I haven't even seen a doctor. I just relied
Mm.
on resting and taking
Mm.
what meds I have at home. So
Yeah, you
yeah,
you don't seem to have any flu symptoms, right? And your throat is okay.
throat is okay. I took leftos. Yeah, that's
Right.
fine.
All
Yeah.
right. Fantastic. So what we're gonna do today is, I was so fascinated with what Irene said about, besides of course CHIJ, the Stamford Road Cafe, the Stamford Café, as well as living in 19 Dhoby Ghaut, right?
Yes.
Mm. Yeah, so I'm going to start with that. Um, I want to show a map, right? And maybe you can orientate us as to where was it you lived. The Dhoby Ghaut area is unfortunately split into two in the maps. So this is the upper stretch, right? So you can see from Amber Mansions. Can see or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. McDonald's house,
Okay.
Amber Mansions. So I imagine you are on the next map, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So if you look at where Amber Mansions was one of the places that I walked
okay.
to because there were a few shops that were nice, but I'm
Mm.
closer to the cafe building
All
side.
right. All right. So the
Yeah.
next map,
So
yeah. So you are
so
on, yeah.
yeah, Dhoby Ghaut. Just let's say if you see where it splits up into Dhoby Ghaut that goes into Kirk Terrace.
Mm.
So just about five five or six shop houses from in that row, that was where we lived. So now
Oh,
you can't see anything, of course, because it's been
yes.
obliterated by the new building.
So which side of the road is this? Is this closer to Kirk Terrace?
Yeah, it's on this. We were on the left side of the road, the
Mm,
upper
mm,
side of the road, and it was a very busy area. Uh, there were shops. It's like you really literally it's shops and houses. Um, there were many. I think about four or five hairdressing places.
mm,
After a while, my mother decided that we would use the lower half of the ground floor of our house to have a hairdressing place. So even there were others already, including our neighbors next door, who weren't very pleased that competition had come up right next to them, and especially as theirs was a very neighborhood type of operation. Ours was much fancier. For one thing, we had air conditioning.
mm.
I don't think the others had air conditioning before we did, but we started that. And my mother, since we ran a cafe, when she started it, my mother was a very clever marketer. She would have people bring over at lunchtime, bring over sandwiches and snacks from the restaurant. And so customers would have tea, coffee, and sandwiches while they had their hair done. So that was like, wow,
Mm.
that kind of wow factor. And the neighbor did not like it. But that
Tell.
was in the mid 60s. I think around the time that I was in primary five. Yeah, primary five. Yeah.
Right. Tell us
That
about
was,
tell us about the shop house you were living in.
it's just two stories,
Mm.
and it was rented from the government for, I'm not sure whether it was $40 a month, or not government, sorry. It was a rent control shop house, and it was the shop house was owned by a Muslim trust. I cannot remember the name.
Mm.
Um, but it was an Al something or other. And we paid something like $40 a month or $55. I'm not sure whether the $55 was for the other shop house that we used to have the restaurant in, but that was just $40 a month, which from the time my mother started renting the place, or my parents then started renting the place, would have been a considerable sum. But then there was rent control imposed, and I don't exactly know when,
Mm.
but it was definitely before I was born.
Mm.
And so that was, something that was nobody wanted to move out because hey, that was a great price as prices rose. So
Was this a
the
typical shop house, as in, there was a shop below?
no, we
Oh.
we had it was very interesting because it's not at street level exactly. It was slightly raised. There was
Mm.
no basement. It was slightly raised. So it was like you went up to us. There was like about four or five steps to go up to the ground floor.
Oh.
And there were, there was like, like some of them, one of the, mostly the upper levels were used as homes. The next right to face as you face my unit, to the left was a an aquarium,
Mm.
and there's definitely they used up the whole thing, including the courtyard, for their shop, and they were pretty successful. And there were a couple of others, and right at the far end, if you go like facing but all the way to the right, at the other end of Kirk Terrace and the beginning of Seligi Road, there was the Red Sea Aquarium, which is I think still in business, and
Mm.
that was huge, and it was something that fascinated all of us children because we would go there and when you had nothing better to do, you just go there and you just look at the fish because they were so gorgeous.
When you say aquarium, you mean a fish shop, lah, right?
Yeah,
Ah, okay.
yeah.
Uh,
And then the one next to us, I can't remember the name. It was much smaller. The Red Sea one was much bigger. It
uh,
was about like it looked like a 2 unit thing, but it was right at the corner. So they had room. And there was also the very famous at the time, about three shop units away from us. It was called Rex Bookstore,
mm.
and it was a great place to get all the magazines. You could buy some newspapers there too, but the magazines were wonderful, and I loved it because I would go there and buy sweets all the time when I had money. So in the front, there would be on the left side of the shop, there would be the array of sweets and snacks. Then on the right side, it would be a kind of a real sweep of magazines, including by the time we left, Vogue magazine, but they had teen magazines like
Mm.
Valentine, Beano, stuff like that. And so whatever it was, the school children who could afford it would always go there and see that. And those of us who really couldn't afford to buy them all the time, we just go there, and the people, because I was a neighbor, they would humor me, and I was uh, 5 or 6 when I started doing this. And I would just kind of sneak peeks at things and quickly read articles. And they just let me do that because I was a neighbor and I didn't mess up their stuff.
Mm. What about the books? What did they have?
They had some textbooks. They also
Mm.
had some, but the books in the end were not as lucrative for them as
Mm.
other merchandise, including cosmetics and other stuff. And usually what was great was that if you went there, you said, I want this. Do you have this? So, like for instance, one of the things that we regularly bought from them was talcum powder.
Mm.
So I remember one time somebody wanted, possibly my sister, wanted a Yardley's uh, lavender scented talcum powder. They didn't have it, but she brought over a, a, a container from one of her friends. And within a week, they were selling it because it's like it was really responsive to what customers wanted.
Correct. I mean, was it a bookstore that sold, talcum
Yeah,
powder,
so in
or
the
a
end, the
provision
bookstore
shop
sort
that
of
sold books, right?
yeah, the bookstore sort of became, it was just a name. So
Mm,
they may have a name, but I don't recall really buying books from them.
mm,
But everything, shampoos, moisturizer, all kinds of stuff like that.
yeah.
And of course, always the chocolates, the snacks was what drew us there in the first place.
You didn't get your textbooks from them?
Nope.
No. Oh.
The textbooks were from usually from Bras Basah Road,
Mm.
or if it was from the school might order some, and a lot of us really could not afford to buy new textbooks, so we would they would the teachers would organize like the the upper classes would keep the books and then they would sell them secondhand to us.
Right, right.
There was no kind of like stigma in getting secondhand books
Mm,
because
mm.
all these things came to us mostly from England, and they were terribly expensive. I think the exchange rate was something like $10 to the pound, which was not not the actual exchange rate, which was about more like $8 to the pound, but this is what the booksellers would charge.
Mm. Right. Going back to the house, right? Kind of describe for us the house. You guys were living on the ground floor, is that right?
No, we began. We lived in the whole house,
Mm-hmm.
and then somewhere around, I think it was probably in the we probably were there from the late the or the middle 40s, as early as that, possibly even earlier, and possibly throughout the war, the occupation. And then I was born in 49,
Mm.
and I was born well, not in the house, but while we were there. I think some of my siblings may have been born in the house. And then we had the kitchen and everything downstairs, and upstairs was, well, our living quarters. But my mother had it, um she extended the back of the upstairs, and it became like the kitchen, and then we covered over part of the area that would have otherwise been a vent, a big kind of empty space. And that's where we had our dining table and everything. So then we just used that, and downstairs was a hairdressing. So that was from 62, 63 onwards. So we had the hairdressing there. And it proved quite popular. So my mother was really a good businesswoman. She had two thriving businesses: the restaurant in Bras Basah Road, and this one, the hairdressing. It was called Orchid Ladies Hairdressing Salon.
How did your mom manage to run two businesses?
Oh, she just hired the right people,
Uh huh.
and she didn't run the hairdressing
All right.
salon. She did the
Okay.
hiring. And back then, I think there was a lot of unemployment, so it was not, uh, that difficult to get people to work with us. And we had a good reputation, and my mother was very good about looks. So our hairstylists, everybody wore uniforms. Some of the neighboring places, they just wore ordinary clothes, but ours wore pink, very nice pink tailored uniforms. The uniforms were tailored by my mother's godson, who was a Shanghai trained tailor. And they were really, really elegant looking. And we had a proper opening with flowers and all sorts of things. And I have a picture somewhere, but I couldn't find it, of us posing outside the salon on the day that
Yes,
we
please
officially
find
opened.
it.
I will try to find it. A
It's
lot of this is
amazing.
actually in
Yeah.
my. No, my mother was one of those who liked taking pictures, and liked having pictures
Yeah.
taken. But then she was very photogenic. I'm not.
Oh, wow.
She and
Mm.
my eldest sister very photogenic,
I should
and
have asked this last time even. What is your mom's name?
oh, her name was Wu Chuen Chuen.
Can you spell it?
Wuchuen.
Chuen Chuen.
So
Oh,
she came from uh, somewhere in Guangzhou. Trying to remember the name. The Punyi area.
Punji area. Do you know when she
I
came? Was it in the 1930s?
Has to be somewhere like that because my eldest brother, the eldest in the sibling, was born in 1939. So he
Mm.
was born in Hong Kong. So after that, they came to Singapore, but I don't know whether they were in Singapore at all in the 1930s. My birth father was from Pudong in Shanghai, in the Shanghai area, and his family was in the piano business.
Mm.
So they had a shop and their kind of, I guess, their factory in Seligi Road.
Uh, Interesting.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the Cantonese women came to Singapore in the 1930s, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Ah, see, I don't know about that. Yeah,
Mm.
but she didn't like come like on a ship with a whole bunch of people. She came. By the time she came to Singapore, I think she was already married. But she had she didn't start out as a business owner. She was trained as a teacher. She was born in Sumatra, in Medan,
Mm.
and because I think Sukarno outlawed uh, s- schooling in Chinese after I think basic or middle school. So if you wanted to continue your education, you had to continue it in Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia. So my mother, when she was a teenager, went off by herself to China. I mean, I really cannot believe, she just basically went on a ship and went off to China and went to study. She had a little money that she had saved up. I don't know how. She didn't like to talk about her past.
Mm.
And there she worked very hard as a student. And then she had the misfortune to entrust her money to a senior teacher. And I guess it was enough that the senior teacher ran off with the money. So my mother was absolutely like so upset. She thought, what's going to happen to me? She told us she went to the principal and told her, and she was crying. And she said, this is what has happened. And I don't have any money. And the principal told her, don't worry. You will help me to teach class, and that will pay for your education. So what she did was every night the principal would teach her the lessons she was going to teach the next day. And then my mother would help her to teach most of the time.
Mm.
I was like, wow, you're a teenager and you're teaching people who aren't very much younger than you. But how she did. And then after that, it's kind of a blur between uh, how did she meet her husband, and
Mm.
because the marriage wasn't a happy one, she
Mm.
really didn't like talking about it. But she could have met him in Shanghai. And then I know that they went to Hong Kong when my eldest brother was born, and then eventually made their way to Singapore.
What do you think was behind her, business acumen? Yeah,
Survival, the
uh,
need to survive,
yeah.
because she she never went back to Indonesia. She never liked talking about her family life.
Mm-hmm.
She would tell bits and pieces, but she was a girl at a time when boys were much, much, much more treasured. So she had that basic urge to survive, and that was what carried her on. She learned her bit. I would look at pictures and say, "What's happening here?" And then she'll say, "Oh, then I there was one where she was with a I can't find this picture now. She was with a classmate or a schoolmate, and they were both wielding hockey sticks." And I was very thrilled when I found that picture because I was playing hockey in school. And I said, "Ma," she said, "Oh, that was more for just for, for the picture. I didn't really play hockey, but, it made a nice picture." So there were these pictures of her in the school and whatever. And she would sometimes say, "Oh, uh, during the winter, it was very, very hard because if you forgot to rescue your washing, the what you had put out in the basin would freeze over and stuff like that." But it was only in little bits that she would give you these glimpses. It was quite maddening because I guess that's where I started my career as a journalist. I kept pestering her with questions, but I really could not put together a
Mm.
cohesive story, and still can't, about what her life was really, really, really like. It was just glimpses here and there.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, why did she start a business in the first place, right? Instead of working as most people would have done.
Um, she did for a while.
Mm.
She worked in as a teacher
Mm.
in Johor. And that we found out only because one of my one of her mahjong kakis was an engineer, and he had business in Johor. And I don't know why he mentioned my mother's name. And somebody said, "I remember her. She used to teach here," and da 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 da. And then he came back and to our house, and the next time they were playing mahjong, he said, "By the way, so and so from Johor says hello." And my mother was just flabbergasted, like, "What?" Because she just said, "Yeah, yeah, I've been there, I worked there." But I think teachers didn't earn a whole lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And when she started having so many children, she had six in the end. And I think that it was just impossible to do. And so she just thought, "What am I going to do?" I believe she did try to start the restaurant in the house in Dhoby Ghaut at first, but
Mm.
then eventually they started it in Bras Basah Road.
Mm. So which one was the first business?
The first business was the restaurant. So I don't know what else they did before that. My birth father
Sure.
worked uh, at he was he spoke he spoke um, on unusually for somebody of his generation. He spoke English very well.
Mm-hmm.
He also spoke just about any dialect you care to choose. And then he worked on his work was on a ship. He worked for the Lloyd Trestino Italian shipping company as an assistant purser, something like that.
Mm.
And because of that, he had to deal with the people in the dockyards. So he told me he learned how to speak Malay for one thing. He spoke it very well. He also spoke Tamil, Gujarati, Italian because of the bosses. And he and my mother were incredible linguists. They could speak any dialect, just about. So I tested my mother in this years later with a friend who is from a very obscure whose dialect group was a very obscure group somewhere, and I said, Mom, I found somebody who knows, his dialect. I don't think you can speak. And that way, challenge. She said, you bring him here. So I said, yeah, yeah, yeah. So he went, and my mother said, okay, speak to me in your dialect. And so he spoke to her in his dialect. And so she was like, it was like as though she was tuning her ears. And then after about 4 or 5 minutes, she started replying to him in his dialect. And he almost fell off his chair
Mm-hmm.
because he said, my God, I have never met anybody outside my family who can speak this dialect.
Mm.
And I don't ask me what the dialect was, but that was it. So she had that talent, she had the thing, and she had 6 children that she had to raise. So whatever would work, she did it. She didn't start out being
Mm. Mm.
a qualified chef or anything, but she learned, and she was truly a marvelous chef,
Mm.
really. And she loved, uh, quite apart from it being a business, she was interested and she loved to feed people.
Yeah.
So we always said that when she closed shop, when she's this is like hopping over down a few decades. The the people next to us was a shop called Wu Chan's, as you can see from the photo that I
Mm.
sent you, and they wanted to buy over our shop unit because their business was very good, but they never they couldn't ask her because she didn't own it, and the owners could not throw her out because this was rent control and everything. So what happened was, she bought over from the original owners who had been pressuring her, please buy over this shop unit, please buy over this shop unit, because she wanted to put in air conditioning. She wanted to put in, make dress up the place so that she could, without the air conditioning, she couldn't get was it the first class liquor, liquor license.
Mm.
And she figured out selling liquor is more profitable. And the restaurant can move up a notch or two if she can do all this. It was already, but we didn't have air conditioning. So she bought over the place, and then um, another shop like Mo Chan's.
Right. Let me just show the photo you sent me, right?
Yes,
So this is the
the menu.
menu, and there's an advertisement, right, for Mo
Yes,
Chan's.
yes. So there
Mm.
people also came over to eat. It
Mm.
was a family-run business, and they
Mm.
would come over to eat as well.
Right, right. And this is the menu. It is a huge menu, actually, right?
Uh, Considering, yeah, but that it was a small place, but it was a huge menu. It was very similar to what is that place now that sells it? This is what I call Hainanese Western, Hainanese British menu. So you had things like Salisbury steak, you had hamburgers, which the hamburger was not a burger the way that we see it now, but it was a dish with um, fries and with vegetables to go with it, cooked vegetables. So we also had, because this is what the British like to eat, uh, um, fried mami, fried bihun, and also fried rice.
Mm.
And we had a range of curries, which are very
Yeah.
popular, especially on a Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are kind of local dishes catered to the British taste, right?
Yes and
Mm.
no. I mean,
Sweet and sour
our
pork.
our
Yeah.
they were not as spicy as you'd get in Little India,
Mm.
but they were pretty spicy.
Mm.
And after the British decided to, like the British were when the British came back after the occupation, after the war ended, and then a lot of the 50s was Singapore was sort of booming, and we got Chinese customers as well. we got a couple of very regular Indian customers, including a guy who ran the BP De Silva jewelry store. And he came for lunch almost every day. And there was a doctor uh, who had a practice in Chinatown in Smith Street, and he would come very often. So there were all these great regulars. And then
Mm.
of course you can't for prestige you can't beat the fact that Lee Kuan Yew would sometimes come for lunch, not for dinner, only for lunch sometimes. And he came with I remember that he came with Eddie Barker, he came with Lim Kim San, um few of the other ministers, the old ministers. And I don't recall Rajaratnam coming though, but he may have.
They probably came from Parliament, right?
Parliament, or well, their offices were not work. You could walk from where the offices were,
Right.
City Hall. So you could walk there. It's not that far. And back then, people walked everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, look at
So when
a number of eggs that you have, right?
Oh, very popular. One of our
Yeah.
most popular dishes was the fried eggs. There was 3 fried eggs, and you had a generous helping of fries and a grilled tomato with it. And when we first sold it, I don't know what the price is on here, but we first sold it was $1. It was just $1,
Yeah.
and it was very filling. So this is not one of the early menus. This is much later menu.
Later one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they do have the fried bee hoon here. Yeah.
So you see, the fried eggs is $1. Then the boiled eggs are just 60 cents, and the 60 cents is for 2 eggs. Yes.
So, and besides, it's Miu Chan's, right? Ladies dressmakers.
So we used to call them tourist traps because the tourists love those places. Back then, Mo Chan's would have these runners who would go to the cruise ships, and they would hire taxis to bring the people in, and then also to wait for them and bring them back. And if they spent enough, they would tell them, they would send them over to my mom's restaurant and tell them, oh, dinner is on us. Usually it would be a nighttime thing. And sometimes the boss would come over and ask my mother, we have a ship coming in very late tonight. Do you think you can stay open? The ship is coming in maybe 11 o'clock. And can you stay open till about 2 o'clock? Because they have to be back on the ship by about 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So my mother would get a couple of the stalwarts and say, okay, can you please stay? And then, of course, us children would be there. Usually it'd be on a Saturday night. And then we'd work and make an extra money. And when the customers came over from next door, one of the store people from the family would indicate to us whether this was the meal on the house, that means charged to the Mo Chans, or whether they had to pay themselves because they didn't buy enough.
Hygienic conditions of the highest standard.
Oh, definitely. My mother was extremely fussy about cleanliness because partly because we all ate there ourselves. So if something dropped on the floor, even though the floor was pretty clean, that's it. Out it goes. It doesn't go back onto. Unlike and I think quite a few other establishments.
The favorite restaurant of the Forces. So a lot of the British came here, the service people.
A lot
right?
of them, yeah. And they had very close to SJI. SJI had this green patch of a field which they would let the convent girls use as well, right opposite the school. And right next to that was a kind of a military police station. So those guys would come the officers would come, and we were right between there and the Britannia Club. The building is still there, but that's where those guys went. And I don't know what kind of food they served there, but a lot of the people would go to the Britannia Club to drink or to swim or whatever, and then they'd come to our place to eat.
I mean, that does show that your mom kind of knew the market, right, and the business in the area.
I don't know. My father was a pretty canny guy, but I have no idea because he was too busy, enjoying himself.
Is there anything your mom ever said, that showed, that she was thinking about the business very deeply?
Oh, it's not that she said anything, but she was, she worked till after midnight every day. And by 10 o'clock, she'd be there, and she probably would have been to the market before that as well. So she was very much in charge. She was the chief, she was the boss in the kitchen. She was the chef, and she was definitely the one who managed everything, set the prices, decided what was going to go on the menu. And she was also very interested in expanding the menu. So what you don't see, and I couldn't get, were the little cards that I or my sister would write for the specials. So we didn't have lobster, I think, on this menu, but we would have a baked lobster. So it's like lobster, like thermidor, and there was grilled cheese on top and everything. And that was something that she had eaten somewhere and thought, oh, I can make that.
Yeah.
And then, I should mention, just a couple of doors down from ours was the very first Russian restaurant in Singapore. This was the Troika restaurant. And I don't know her real name, but we called her Mami Luba. She was a Russian chef. She didn't speak much English, definitely didn't speak Chinese, learned a bit of Malay, but she and my mother were both smokers. So what they would do is that after the lunch hour, they would both go out into the back lane at the back of the kitchen, and they would be smoking. So one day, my mother kind of like with sign language, kind of invited her to come over and have something to eat at our place. So she was like, oh, so it was really cute because one doesn't speak Chinese. One is Chinese, doesn't speak anything close to Russian. The other one speaks a bit of English, but basically is Russian. But they communicated very well because they were both chefs. So they would like, and she would pay her compliments, say, oh, sign language, tell her it's very good. And then another day she would bring my mother a plate of something that she had made. And then the big thing was one day she brought over a bowl of borscht that she made. And my mother tried it and liked it very much. And my mother decided to make her own borscht and offer it in the restaurant, which made the owners of the other restaurant very unhappy. I don't know whether my mother underpriced it compared to this, but our customers loved it because it was like, oh, so interesting. And, my mother's version was what I call a Chinese borscht, but they liked it. And what was the other thing? And then somewhere along 1962, I think 62, she hired a guy who had worked in a fairly fancy English restaurant in Singapore, Hainanese guy, and he taught her various other dishes, including Wiener Schnitzel. So here is this funny little restaurant in Singapore. You picture this. It serves essentially food that the British have taught their Hainanese houseboys to cook. Then you add things like borscht,
Mm.
Wiener Schnitzel. I was really interested in all these things because my mother didn't know anything about the background or anything except that people like it. I'm going to put it on the menu, and I would have to find out how to spell it so that I could write it on the little card and stick it to the menu as a special.
Right.
And I would go to there weren't that many, but I would go to the library and look up the things, the National Library, and look up things so that I knew how to spell it properly.
Yeah. This episode is really on your mom, actually.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, I have been trying to write a book
Yeah.
about her, but it's really kind of difficult because there's so many things that I have to speculate about, and then some of my friends say, never mind, just be, write it like a journalist. Just say this is speculative, and then you write it, and then this is not, and this is factual, and then this is what she said. So, but I'm the kind of writer I need a publisher to come to me and say, okay, here's $50,000. Write the book for me. Give it to me in 6 months' time. That's it. Because I need that spur to get me going.
Sure, sure. I mean, I would like to tell the story of Stamford Café and your mom in my book on shops and small businesses in Chinatown.
Mm,
So it'd be great to, I mean, if we can't have the facts, right? Like the facts are not that clear, it'd be great to get a sense of, the way that your mom worked as a businesswoman. Did she think,
mm.
for example, about expanding?
No,
No.
no. She was not avaricious. She was not like, oh, I can make so much more money doing this. She made enough money for, and we lived quite well. And she if she had a weakness, it was she liked nice clothes.
Mm-hmm.
But she also had a um she had this deal with the next door guys. So Mo Chans would say, hey, so my people spend so much money. Tell you what, lah, you come and then we make some nice clothes for you, and we like barter trade. So that's what sometimes happened. But she also had this godson who was, as I told you, he made the uniforms for the hairdressing. He was a wonderful tailor and he would make her clothes. So we'd go to places like Morton Silk Store, which was this very, very, uh, it was expensive, not just for its time, but it was really expensive. They sold beautiful silks, lace fabrics, and everything. But there was it was a little shop house thing that ended just before the old Supreme Court building. There was like right, and so that was one of my mom's favorite shops. So whenever she felt that she could reward herself, she'd go there and buy some fabric and make something nice.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
other than that, she wasn't, the kind who would spend money on many things. That was it.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I think after this, I'm going to maybe try to write a few paragraphs, and then I let you see it, and then please add to it, and please find the photos. It'd be great to have some photos, right? Uh,
Great.
this is what? This Mo Chance.
Yeah.
Mm.
This one came from, oh, there's a postscript to this. Years later, I'm in the Straits Times newsroom, and there's this. I noticed that there was a reporter in the Business Times called Sangeet Molchan.
Mm.
And I said, I've not met anybody with that surname. I wonder if she's related. But there never seemed the occasion to go and talk to her. And then what happened was we had a new girl in the office, and her name was Artie Mochan. And so one day I went up to her and I said, Artie, did your family have this shop in Bras Basah Road? that sold cameras and silks and so. And her jaw, it was a jaw drop moment for her. And she said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "It was right next to my mom's restaurant." And I said, "We knew them very well." And I didn't get to meet her, the surviving members of the family. Her mother was still alive then, but it was like, oh my God. And then she said, oh, she pulled out a hanger, a clothes hanger, which was pink plastic with the name Mol Chan's on it. She said, that's all I've got left from there. Because they moved to um, that building, which is next to, which adjoins the Kempinski, or rather is the Kempinski. And I think they had 2 units there, and they prospered for a while. And then eventually the business folded.
Right.
I don't know. I don't exactly know why. So, but that was, something that we noticed that they went. But that was long after we had left that Bras Basah Road area. So with Artie, I think that was the beginning of the two of us becoming friends, because I came home and I looked for stuff that Mo Chan's had made for my mother, and I brought them to Artie and I said, "Here, take these. This is from Mo Chan's." I said, "Some of them they don't have labels on them because they just made them for my mother." But that was it. I think she's still wearing one of them, which is quite sweet.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in the 1970s, urban renewal came to Bras Basah Road, including building of the Bras Basah complex. What do you remember of the changes in the 70s? Were you still there?
No, what happened was to go back to 1960, it was 1969. I had worked there from the time I was about 5 or 6. And I was by this time in pre-university. And I remember one day my mother said, oh, she had bought over the shop house from the owners, that trust. Oh, no, not the trust. The trust was Dhoby Ghaut, but this was the Hainanese people who ran the pharmacy next door. So she had bought it over. She was going to redo everything, put in air conditioning, put wallpaper on, do all sorts of stuff, and upgrade the place, new furniture. And we were going to sell liquor. So I got very excited, and I started reading up on booze, because I thought, well, maybe I'll be still working there as well. So, and then in the middle of everything, what happened was she got this offer. I can't remember the name of the people, but they were also in the same business as Mo Chan's. So my mother said, oh, okay, I'll consider the offer. And then Mo Chan's heard about it, and they told her, hey, madam, you cannot sell to our cousins, I mean, if you sell to anybody, you should sell to us, and you should give us a better price. And my mother said, you won, you bid. So they bid and they outbid the other side. So they took it over. And with that money, my mother decided, I can retire. So she retired. What she did was she bought an apartment. And this was in the late 60s into the 70s. She bought an apartment in Cavanagh House. And I remember, wow, so much. It cost so much. It was $82,000. And I thought it was, incomprehensible. There's this, but we got it at a special price because we knew the owners. And then she managed, about a year and a half later, she managed to flog it to a Taiwanese who needed to invest in Singapore to get his PR, and he bought it for 195,000. So then, at that point, my mother thought, "I'm made. I don't need to work anymore." So she put that money, socked that money away in the bank, and she went on holiday.
What happened to the hairdressing business?
Well, this is not the hairdressing. Sorry, this is the hairdressing. My sister continued with that. She actually went. This is my third sister. she went to Japan to study hairdressing and beauty, whatever, cosmetology. And then she came back and she ran the place. And then eventually the government acquired that whole role, and that was the end of that.
So she closed it?
Oh, she had to close because you have no choice. We didn't own it, but the government had acquired it.
I mean, she didn't like move it elsewhere?
No.
Tell us about your childhood growing up in Dhoby Ghaut.
Oh, I had nothing to compare it with, so I thought it was a pretty good childhood. I had this ama, and I adored her because she was like my mother, because my mother was so busy running the restaurant. That and she was very, very good. So I was, not neglected at any point, well fed, whatever it was, and I was the youngest. My next sibling is about 6 years older than me. 6 years, yeah, I think 6 years, 7
How
years.
many of you total?
6 altogether.
Right.
So there's a huge gap between my next sibling, is my brother, and me, and so I just looked at it and I decided, boy, I wonder how many um, illegal abortions my mother had to have had. Essentially, the marriage was over, but the man still has to do his thing. So eventually, he wanted to bring home a second wife, and my mother said no. So he said the short version, I won't go into the nitty-gritty, was that he told her to give him, I can't remember whether it's 5,000 or 3,000, which was a hell of a lot of money then, because you could buy a house with it, in return for signing over control of the children, because this was way before the Women's Charter, and the man controlled everything. So she got the thing done through my godmother, who was a lawyer, and she begged, she borrowed, and she got him the money. He didn't believe that she would get it, and he told me himself he didn't believe, but he thought he would prevail and he would bring the other woman home as wife number 2. But yeah, so that was quite something, and we all got educated. My eldest sibling was supposed to become an architect. He went to the Polytechnic, but then that being the 50s and the 60s, he found things to do that were more profitable, and he decided to junk his Polytechnic studies. But he told me, and I don't know how true this is. He said, Shaw House, the old Shaw House, I designed that. And I said, what do you mean? I said, I know the name of the architect who designed that, and it's not your name. He said, oh, I wasn't qualified as an architect, but I designed everything. He just signed it. He just signed on the drawings. That's it. So he would sometimes take me out in his car, and he would point to a certain building, and one time one of the buildings that he pointed to was the home of one of my classmates. And I said, no way, you couldn't have done that. Then he said, you go and ask them. It's that guy. I drew it, and this is it. And there's a swimming pool, and the swimming pool is designed so that it cannot be seen from the road, because they're a very private family. And one day she invited me to her home, and I thought, my God, it's true, because it was exactly as he had described it. But anyway, that was it. But my second brother was the one I was closest to, and we had pretty good times when we were kids. He went on, became a radio officer on a ship to begin with, and did quite well, and would always come home and give me little presents from wherever he was. So he was the one who really, he would have gone to places like Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, India, when the rest of us didn't had just, not been any further than Malaysia. But that kind of, you grew up in this family, and it was I don't know whether you can say the family was close, but we all lived together
Mm.
fairly harmoniously. And then when I was about 7, I think, I'm not sure whether I was already at school. My godmother, who had 2 sons, no daughters, she asked my mother, "Can you give me your youngest daughter?"
Mm.
So my mother, she had been such a wonderful friend. She was a friend from beginning to end. My mother could not say no. Also, 6 children is a heavy burden. So she thought, okay. And so she gave me to my godmother. But I screwed up their plans because hers was a Teochew household. And I missed my siblings. I missed my amate. I missed the kind of food that I was used to. You see, my mother was very careful. Back then, it was not unheard of for people to choke to death on bones, on whatever.
Mm.
So my mother was very careful with all the children. Fish had no bones, pork had no bones, beef had no bones. Everything was very safe. So I go to this Teochew household where they serve mostly seafood and fish, and the fish had bones, and the seafood had shells, and not only that, but I was allergic to prawns and crabs, and I didn't know how to eat it. So day by day, I would just eat rice and maybe an egg, and sometimes I just wouldn't eat at all, and I kind of got started shrinking. And one of my godmother's friends who had come to visit from Hong Kong told her, "You know that child? She's so miserable. She can't eat. She look at her. She's so skinny now. That's a long time ago, and you better give her back to her mother before she starves to death." So that's how I got sent back to my mother, and I was so happy. My siblings never knew that I had been
Mm.
given away. My
Yeah.
mother just told them, "Oh, she's spending a few days, a few weeks." And the whole episode is like a blank to me because I was so unhappy that I tried to block it out from my mind. So as an adult, I've been kind of like learning how to, trying to figure out how long I was there.
Ah.
But
You must
yeah,
have been quite
so
young then, right?
oh yeah, yeah. I think that's why I think I hadn't gone to school,
Uh,
or maybe I was just on the brink of going to primary one. So yeah. But
yeah.
anyway, that was what happened, and uh, I stayed, friendly with my godmother, but I never wanted to go and live there. Later on, when I was an adult, I'd ask my mother, "Why did you give me away?" When I could ask it without the tears coming out.
Yeah.
And my mother said, "Your godmother came from a wealthy family. She was educated. I was not very well educated. She was a lawyer. You would have had a very good life there, no problem with money. You would have gone to university. Possibly you would have gone to university overseas. You would have had a very good life, much better than I could have provided for you."
Mm.
So that sort of closed that gap. So I understood, but
Yeah. What did you say to that?
oh, you know, I didn't say very much. It's like, oh,
Mm.
but then when I knew she was dying, one day I asked a friend. I said, I want to talk to tell my mother something, but it's very emotional, and I want to tell it to her in Cantonese, but my Cantonese is lousy.
Mm.
So I wrote out what I wanted to tell my mother in English. This friend translated it into Chinese, wrote it out, and gave it to a friend who transliterated it into Cantonese and coached me to speak it in Cantonese. So it's a very long process. And I was thinking, And so one day when I was home with my mother and nobody else was around, I put that piece of paper on my lap and I started talking to my mother. And she was at that time kind of declining, but still, okay. The brain was okay. And she sort of almost sat up with a start because she said, "What? This child is speaking to me in Cantonese? This one doesn't speak Cantonese that well. How does she?" But she didn't see the piece of paper. So I told her that I understood and I had come to terms with being given away. I told her how much it had affected me when I was a kid. And she said, "Oh, we always thought that because you were so young, you would, like many children, just forget about it in time so that then it wouldn't, hurt or anything." So I told her, I said, "No." I said, "I never forgot about it." And I said, "I don't know, I said, I cried myself to sleep every night, every night. And it's, so I could see my mother was getting very emotional. But I said, "I now understand that you were doing it for my benefit. You were doing it because it must have been so hard because there were 6 children. And, this, not, if everybody was all grown up, no problem. But then you had this one who was still in school." So I told her, I said, I understood. And I said, I used something, it was not forgiveness. I said, I understand you did it for my own good and I appreciate it. I never used the word forgiveness because that might have kind of given her the feeling that she had done something wrong. And so in the end, the two of us both ended up crying. But I felt cleansed because I had managed to tell her what I really felt. And after that, I told my siblings, my sisters, this is what I've done. If you have any issues with your mother, I suggest you go and talk to her one on one and tell her and solve it, have a resolution. I don't think I don't think anybody other than my second sister did that. But so as a result of that, I was very much at peace and with her passing, although it was still very emotional. But I understood how she grew up. She didn't even want to tell me how many children there were in her own family. So I didn't know whether there were 2 wives or whether the family was split by something or anything. And all I knew was that she had come from a pretty large family and that one of her favorite siblings, who was a boy, had something, I think possibly he had high fever one day, and his parents took him to a temple, and the temple medium made him, kind of bow down and stand up and bow down until he collapsed, and then he died. So that was so traumatic that she didn't want to talk about the family. And after that, she told me, she says, don't talk about this with other people. And it was only much later on that we met her. My third sister is the only one, because she was working on a ship as a hairdresser, and she went over to Medan and met our grandmother. The rest of us have never met. But I met another aunt. I met when I was there, and I met the youngest, my mom's youngest sibling, when she came to Singapore to spend some time with us.
Thanks, Irene, for sharing the story.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah. Poignant story. Yeah. And adds another dimension to your mom, right? As a mother, as the breadwinner for the family, right? Decisions that she had to make. Um, Tell us, just to kind of pivot a little bit, what do girls do in those days, where outside of school?
Oh, outside of school. Um, when we were at school, we would have all sorts of plans because many of us lived within walking distance of the school. Not all, but many of us. So we would go and we would play hopscotch. So sometimes we'd come over, and then we would just walk around. We would go, a lot of the times we would go to, with one of my friends, we would go to Bras Basah Road to the secondhand bookstores and read the books surreptitiously. So you know what you do is you take a book you want to read, then you read a couple of, you speed read a couple of, pages, then you take that book and you tuck it away somewhere in the wrong place, then then nobody who's looking for it in the, let's say, the fiction area or whatever, would find it. And the next time you just go there and you read some more and then you put it somewhere else. And that's the kind of thing we did because we couldn't afford to buy the books even secondhand. And another thing we did was right across from my home was a park with swings and slides and other kind of things with a. So some of my friends would come over and we would go there and just go on the swings. But most of the time, I think we liked listening to the radio if we had the radio. And one day, I think it was about 12 something, my 12 or 13, my second brother, brought home a record player. And there was like, oh, we can get a record and play it. So this was something that most of my friends didn't have, at least not within they might have a record player in their house, but they couldn't go and just play something on it. So the only things I could even save up to afford were EPs. So I would get an EP and then I'd bring it to my friend's place, plug it in there, and play the record. But my big boon was when my sister became a lawyer. She went to work for David Marshall, and what happened was she told me, she said, I can't remember whether it was Sec 1 or Sec 2 or something like that, and she said, if you top your class, I'll buy you 10 LPs. Music was a big thing in our lives. So I topped the class. So she had to buy me LPs. So then I became like, wow, this girl, she's got a record player and she's got 10 LPs. So I became very popular with my friends. I would bring the record player and the LPs or just the LPs home to their homes and they would play. So music was a very, very, very big thing. The first time I went to a concert, a pop concert, was when Cliff Richard came to Singapore in 1960, 61? No, 61. Has to be 61. 1960, I had polio. I couldn't go anywhere. 61, Cliff Richard came, and my mother actually allowed me to go, provided my sister went along, my second sister, and she said, you can invite one of your friends. So I invited a classmate called Kathleen, and my sister went with us, instantly became a fan of Cliff Richard, and I was in heaven. This was like a big, big, big deal. Another big deal was the movies, because the nice thing about the convent where I went to school was that there was Capitol right next door, and every Thursday, I think there was a change of a movie, and we would get the girls sitting next to the window. Hey, go and stand up and go and see what's showing, and then we would say, okay, do you have any money? And it cost $1 to go in, and sometimes we'd have the money, and sometimes we wouldn't, and sometimes I'd go and I'd beg and plead with my eldest to give me a dollar, or I go to my mother and say, can I have $1 from the cash register? I want to go and see this movie. So those were the ways that, movies, music, and just plain companionship, playing with each other, were big deals. Reading, yeah. Very sedate compared to what they do now.
What were those second-hand bookstores in Bras Basah Road?
Um, Mostly, I think they were run by Indians,
Mm.
and that was where I bought my first copy of a banned book, Lady Chatterley's Lover, because I was just so curious about it. And I brought it to, because what happened was somebody in my class had a copy and she would like let us read it. And then one day I was caught reading it in class and the teacher confiscated the book. And this girl was so unhappy with me. And I said, okay, I'll buy you a replacement. So I managed to get the money and I bought that replacement. But before I gave it to her, I read the whole book and I thought, oh, interesting. So I read the book long before I studied it as a literature student. I
Mm.
can't remember how old I was. I couldn't have been more than 14 or 15.
Was it banned?
Um, I think originally in England it was banned. I
Oh,
don't know
oh,
about Singapore,
okay.
but certainly it was not allowed in my school.
Okay.
This was a convent.
Uh-huh. Uh, I heard that these Indian bookstores later moved to Bras Basah complex. Do you know that?
I'm not sure. I've been
Hmm.
to Bras Basah complex many times,
Hmm.
but the store that I go to, uh, the owner seems to be Chinese. It could be the owner is Indian and the guy who runs it is Chinese,
Uh,
but um, I don't know the guys anymore. Last time we knew them all because they knew they were very nice to us because we didn't steal, we didn't damage the books. They knew what we were up to, that we were trying to read books without having to buy them. But they were shopkeepers were very tolerant, very amiable. I used to walk around even Northbridge Road, and I walk into shops and ask them,
mm,
where does this come from? Like it's a fabric or something,
mm,
or where do you buy this thing from? And they would actually talk to you. Today they look at you and say, you want to buy or not? You know?
mm.
And that's it. So they were very pleasant to, young girls, especially in a convent uniform, was like a guarantee that you'd be well behaved.
I mean, the bookstores must have something to do, right? Besides with the educated adults who were living nearby, the professionals working close by, with the schools. So many schools in that area, right? Yeah.
Well,
Oh,
they had some textbooks, but not
mm,
a whole lot. I
mm,
think mostly what they made their money on
mm,
was porn.
yeah.
I suspect they made their money a lot from porn, selling porn to regular customers or banned books or whatever it was. And I went only to the English bookstores, but
Mm,
there were lots of Chinese
mm,
bookstores
mm,
in Bras Basah, Northbridge Road.
yeah.
And those places I went to buy, stationery, things like that. Like the very famous place called Black Cat. And yeah, and we knew that family too. So it's a very neighborly kind of a thing that uh, people didn't feel that you were in the shop to shoplift. Not like nowadays. But I was especially after I recovered from polio, I was really hooked on books because when I was stuck in bed for many months, um, I would just read anything that came around. So uh, I was fortunate that I became a Straits Times reader back then. My birth father read the papers, and my mother subscribed. So um, I would get the Amate to bring it up for me,
Mm.
and I would read that, and I would read whatever books and magazines that my siblings would leave around. So some of them were probably unsuitable for me, but what the heck? Yeah. So my reading improved a great deal.
I have a last question.
Yeah.
I mean, so much has changed, right? If you go to Bras Basah and Dhoby Ghaut today, very
Mm.
little of that. What you went in the 50s and the 60s will remain. What do you think is the heritage of that area in your mind?
Well, it helps that the chimes is there and
Mm-hmm.
it's still kind of a visual reminder, even though I don't like what they've done with the outside.
Yeah.
But it's that for me, and for those of us who have studied there, who have lived there, it has that feeling of this is the real Singapore, this is where I
Mm.
grew up. There's that feeling of rootedness that you get there, which I don't get, even though I've lived in my condo for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've still, every time I pass by cafe, I have to look left to look at the building because it's like it's it was a tower of pleasure. You
Mm.
know, it was like that was where I saw my first Elvis movie, and it was also happened to be the first midnight movie, Blue Hawaii.
Yeah.
And my mother only let me go simply because it was like a matter of steps from our door. So you have all these wonderful memories. It's like sort of in the ether around the place that you, when I'm there, even though the the landscape has changed so drastically,
Mm.
no more swings, no more park, no more YMCA where we did our ballet lessons. There's still something that resonates.
Mm. It still resonates, huh? So I mean, even if
Yeah.
you look at cafe, right, it's not the same cafe anymore.
Oh, absolutely not. Because we had a friend who lived in the apartment building, and we would sometimes go up there. But that whole tower's all gone. So Cathay doesn't look like Cathay, but it's still to me, like I
Yeah.
remember this place.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at least it's still cafe, right? There's still a building called cafe that tries to replicate what it was.
And one of the things I really appreciate about the government is that when the British left, unlike many countries, we didn't change the names of roads.
Mm.
So everything is still what it used to be in the city, in that part of the city, although some roads have been obliterated.
Yeah.
Um, like one of my favorite roads is the one near Parliament called Hall Pike Road. And I used to walk there, walk everywhere. And it's gone, but at least they didn't change it to something else. And every road name has a meaning. And of course, I used to walk to the canal and imagine the people, the washer people doing the laundry in it, you know, and it was just quite fantastic.
Mm. Yeah. Uh, what do you mean by the real Singapore?
The real Singapore meaning, the Singapore where I grew up,
Mm.
which I still have kind of sentimental ties to. There have been times when my mother feared that I might emigrate because I would become so Western.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't understand the feelings that I have, that they're almost like, you know, really ties that bind, they're almost physical, that bind me to a place. And I I love traveling. I can't ever leave my home.
Mm.
So that's what I sort of mean. I don't know if everybody else feels that way because um I've only lived in very few places. Dhoby Ghaut was one, and then we bought our house in Bukit Timah, and for a while I lived in the apartment that my sister and her husband lived in Clemenceau Avenue. Then we lived in Cavenagh House for a bit, and then that's it. And apart from a time when in my second year of university when I came home, refused to stay in the dorm, and I was literally homeless for about 3 months.
Mm.
So I would just park myself with anybody who would give me a bed for the night. And there was one night I actually slept on campus because the girl who had said, "Oh, you can come home with me," she forgot and she left for home without me. So I slept on the campus by night. Yeah, that's it. But other than that, there are so few places. Whereas nowadays, if you talk to somebody,
Mm.
they were born here, then they moved here, and then they moved somewhere. So they moved so many places, and especially if their parents were investing in property. One of my friends has lived in about 10 places in Singapore before buying her own home. And it's, you don't feel that rootedness if that happens to you. Whereas we were in Dhoby Ghaut, I was in Dhoby Ghaut all the way till what,
Mm.
65, something like that, when we moved. But we moved, you know, um, to Bukit Timah, and then sometimes we moved back. And when there was the riots, we had to stay in certain places. We part of the time we would stay when there was a curfew was lifted. We would stay in the restaurant upstairs, and then another time we would stay in Dhoby Ghaut, and another time we'd stay in the house. So you don't have that moving around kind of a thing. So it's yeah, it's just a sense of place and belonging.
Mm. Right. Great. Fantastic. Thanks for talking to me today.
Thanks.
I really like the part about your mother, which I think is a big focal point here, and as
Oh,
well, yeah, as
one of my good friends always complains, which is, why are you always talking about your mother?
oh, you
And
do
I said,
that.
yeah, I said, there's so much of me that is still, and some of my friends laugh at me when I say, I still talk to my mother. She hasn't left me. She's there. And the first time I realized it was after she died, and I had to organize her funeral, so I couldn't do anything except, um, you know, work things out. And then I think later that year, I was in Milan, and I was walking the streets at night, and there was in the middle of this very fashionable district called the Quadrilatero d'Oro, the Golden Quadrilateral. There was a deli that was open until late at night. It was completely dark. It was November. It was completely dark, and this deli was open. And I looked at the things, and I looked at all the prices in the window. It was very, very swish. And I could swear I heard my mother say, 黑神變鬼,咁貴啦. Like, who's going to buy all this? And I was like so startled because the street was deserted. And I'm hearing this. And I thought, oh, mom is with me. And it was very comforting. So I still talk to her.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
wonderful way to end it.
Yes.
Please try to find some photos. I'm sure they're somewhere.
I will. I will. I will.
Yeah. Talk to you again. I'll let you know when the podcast is ready.
Okay. Sure.
Thanks a lot,
Ah,
Irene, and get well soon.
thanks. Bye.
Bye.